Antonio, do you think the search for truth is fundamental in life?
Nietzsche. Ah, my friend. Truth. That word so venerated by philosophers and men of small spirit, as if it were a shining idol before which they must kneel. But what is truth? Is it something we must pursue as if it were a hidden treasure, or worse yet, as if it were some kind of salvation for our miserable existences? I tell you clearly, the search for truth is not fundamental in life, not at all. This obsession with truth is, at its core, a residue of Christian morality, of that old will to submission and self-renunciation in the name of something supposedly superior. Truth has been seen as redemption, as liberation from shadows. But who says we must be liberated? Who says that what is true is what will save us? That is the great error of centuries of philosophy, from Socrates to Kant. A superstition disguised as virtue. I will tell you in my own words. Convictions are prisons, the gay science. Aphorism 289. An absolute truth, that fixed, eternal truth, is the most suffocating prison of all. Life is not a matter of finding a static truth, but of continuous creation. Those who seek truth with blind faith are like those who yearn for a final rest, a cessation of all movement, of all conflict. But life is not rest, life is becoming, it is struggle, it is contradiction. What I propose is the creation of values, not the search for universal truths. It is the act of creating that defines us, not that of discovering. For what is truth if not a human construction, something we ourselves have invented to make the chaos of the world a little more bearable? At its core, truth is nothing more than a perspective, an interpretation. There are no facts, only interpretations, as I expressed in my posthumous fragments. Life, true life, consists in affirming what is, in embracing chaos, suffering, and making of it an opportunity to create something new. The strong man does not seek truth, he forges his own reality. The Übermensch does not bow before truth, he overcomes it, turns it into something flexible, malleable, a tool for his will to power. So, dear friend, do not seek truth as if it were a divine revelation. Rather, create your own truth, make it yours, mold the world in your own image. That is true power. Not discovering what already exists, but creating what has not yet been. Truth, ultimately, is less important than life itself, because only the living, those who dare to create, to challenge, to love their destiny, are those who truly transcend.
Antonio, so, truth is a creation of life itself, not something in the Platonic heavens. And since life is becoming, so is truth. It is a biological construction.
Nietzsche. Exactly, my friend. Now we are getting to the heart of the matter. Truth is not a celestial entity, fixed and immutable, as that old dreamer of ideas, Plato, believed, who took refuge in a world of perfect shadows, of eternal and universal essences. Bah! What a pathetic flight from real life. Truth, in my conception, is something earthly, biological, as you rightly intuit. It is a product of becoming, something that is molded, that is created and recreated according to the needs of life itself. Life is becoming, flux, constant change, and therefore, truth is also a phenomenon in process, a construction that emerges from the depths of instinct and vital necessity. There are no universal truths. What we call truth is always a perspective, an interpretation that serves a purpose, an affirmation of life's power at a given moment. As I wrote in Beyond Good and Evil, the criterion of truth lies in life itself. What serves life is true. Plato, with his obsession with the immutable, with the eternal, committed the error of the weak, rejecting the sensible world, the world of change, in favor of a fantasy of perfection that exists only in his sick imagination. And how many philosophers followed him like sheep after their blind shepherd, all yearning for that hypothetical true world that would save them from imperfection, from chaos, from life itself. But life, friend, does not seek truth in an abstract or transcendental sense. Life creates what it needs to survive, to grow, to overcome itself. That is the real truth. Not a truth in the heavens, but a truth forged in struggle, in blood, in suffering, in joy. Truth, in this sense, is biological, as you say, because it arises from life's need to assert itself. Everything we call knowledge is really a series of strategies that life has developed to interpret the world and dominate it. Is it not the will to power that drives man to create these so-called truths? Science itself, with all its prestige, is nothing more than a set of useful perspectives, tools for dominating nature, not for accessing some absolute truth. What is true today may be false tomorrow, and that is natural, because truth changes with the conditions of life. So, yes, you have grasped my idea. Truth is a vital construction, a product of life itself, and as life never ceases to become, to transform itself, so too must truth always be something in motion, something that adapts to the pulses and rhythms of existence. There is no Platonic heaven where truth rests, immortal and untouchable. Truth is here, on earth, beneath our feet, in our entrails, emerging and disappearing as does everything alive. Therefore, the strong man does not seek truth to submit to it. He creates his own truth like an artist, like a warrior, adapting it to his needs, his desires, his will to power.
Antonio, so, if the philosopher William James said that what is true is what gives good results, according to his pragmatism, from your vitalism, you would say that what is true is what serves life. Life itself is the criterion of truth, if it affirms it, or of falsehood, if it weakens it. Is that so?
Nietzsche. Exactly, my friend, you have captured the essence of my thought. If William James, with his pragmatism, says that what is true is that which gives good results, I, from my vitalism, would say that what is true is that which affirms and strengthens life, that which stimulates growth, power, overcoming. Life itself, in its chaotic impulse, in its constant becoming, is the only criterion of truth I recognize. Truth and falsehood are not abstract, universal questions, but depend on their effect on life. What is true, then? That which affirms life, which allows life to grow, expand, dominate. Everything that nourishes the will to power, that fundamental impulse of life to impose itself, to overcome itself, is true. Conversely, everything that weakens life, that reduces it, that subjects it to the small, the petty, or the decadent, is false. Not by any logical or metaphysical criterion, but by its vital effect. As I already said in the Antichrist, all that enhances the feeling of power in man, the will to power, power itself, is good. All that springs from weakness is bad. James's pragmatism seeks what works, what is useful for achieving certain practical ends. But my vitalism goes beyond mere pragmatic utility. I ask, for what end? For whom? What serves the weak, what sustains resentment or mediocrity, may seem useful to them, but is false from the perspective of life in its highest expression. I am not content with what works. I seek what affirms life in its highest form, what enables the emergence of the Übermensch, of the man who not only survives, but creates new values, new meanings. In this sense, life is, as you have well said, the ultimate criterion of truth. If something affirms life, if it drives it toward greatness, toward creation, toward overcoming, then it is true. If something, on the other hand, weakens life, if it makes it fearful, decadent, submissive, then it is false. That's simple. There are no eternal or metaphysical truths that we can discover in Platonic heavens or in philosophers' abstract ideas. Truth is biological, vital, and changes along with the forces of life. This is why I reject the ideas of objective truth as traditional philosophers have conceived them. All truth is perspective. It is a tool we use to assert ourselves in the world, to impose ourselves upon it. And what we call truth, ultimately, is nothing more than a useful interpretation that serves life, that strengthens it, that makes it more full and powerful. So yes, my friend, for me, life itself is the criterion of both truth and falsehood. What serves life is true, what weakens it, false. There is no truth outside of what life itself needs to overcome itself.
Antonio, therefore, perspectivism is a result of each biology defending its own truth.
Nietzsche. Ah, friend, you have unearthed a profound truth with your intuition. Perspectivism is, indeed, the direct result of each biology, each being, each form of life, defending its own truth. There exists no single, objective truth universally valid for all beings. What we call truth is nothing more than the expression of the will to power of each being, of each organism, interpreting the world from its vital necessity, from its own way of asserting and surviving. Each biology, from man to the smallest insect, sees the world through its own perspective, shaped by its instincts, impulses, and needs. There is no hidden true world waiting to be discovered. What exists is an interpreted world, and these interpretations are always the reflection of each organism's vital struggle to assert itself in the chaos of existence. As I wrote in The Gay Science, Aphorism 374, the world has become infinite to us once again, insofar as we cannot reject the possibility that it includes infinite interpretations. Perspectivism, then, arises because each living being interprets reality from its own biological structure, from its own desires, from its own limitations. For the eagle, truth is that of open sky and dominion over the heights. For the lamb, truth is security in the herd, protection from danger. Both see what appears to be the same world, but interpret it in radically different ways. The eagle soars seeking prey and dominion, while the lamb huddles seeking safety in the herd, because their biologies and their wills to power are fundamentally opposed. And in man, this perspectivism manifests itself in an even more complex way, for our will to power is reflected not only in the biological, but also in the cultural, moral, and intellectual. Different cultures, different civilizations, are nothing but manifestations of different interpretations of the world, all born from their own will to life, from their struggle to impose their values, their meanings. Each epoch, each civilization, has created its own truth, but none is definitive, none is eternal. All are perspectives, transitory constructions that serve a particular biology or will. My fierce criticism of moralists and metaphysicians of the past, especially Plato and the Christians, is that they tried to impose a single absolute truth, valid for all men, for all times. What a great error! They did not recognize that what they called truth was only their perspective, their way of imposing their own values and vital needs. Christianity, for example, is not a divine truth, but the perspective of the weak, of the resentful, of those who need to deny life to endure it. That is why, in my perspectivism, there is no absolute truth, but many truths, all dependent on the forces that create them. Each biology, as you rightly point out, defends its truth because that truth serves its interests, its growth, its power. And the strong man, the man who seeks to transcend himself, does not submit to a single truth. He creates new truths, imposes his own will upon chaos, transforms the world according to his will to power. Therefore, perspectivism is the natural consequence of the diversity of wills, of the multiplicity of biological and cultural forces competing to assert themselves. There is no true world behind these interpretations, only an infinite dance of perspectives struggling to impose themselves. The challenge, then, is not to discover truth, but to create your truth. As I said in Beyond Good and Evil, truth is a construction of strong men, those who have the will to create it.
Antonio, thus, truth is a process of organic creation, which when it degenerates into decadence, is false according to your criterion, although, within its own schemes, it may consider itself to be in the Platonic heavens, as is the case of the self-proclaimed Christian truth, which tries to propagate itself to all men, when not all men are weak and cowardly in spirit to accept it despite cultural pressure.
Nietzsche. Ah, friend, you've hit the nail on the head. Truth, as I conceive it, is a process of organic creation, a vital affirmation that emerges from the needs, instincts, and will to power of a culture, a people, or an individual at a given moment. When that vital creation degenerates, when it becomes decadent, then it becomes false from my perspective, although within its own schemes it may continue to consider itself truth, like in those Platonic heavens so venerated by the weak in spirit. You take a perfect example, the self-proclaimed Christian truth. This is, in its origin, a decadent construction, born from the resentment of slaves, of the weak, of those who reject life because they cannot bear its harshness, its chaos, its tragedy. Christianity is not a truth that affirms life. It is a negation of life, an attempt to domesticate what is wild, powerful, and free. It propagates a morality of compassion, humility, and submission, but not as virtues of greatness, rather as mechanisms to contain the strong, to crush the excellent and make everything elevated kneel before the base. Within its own scheme, Christianity believes it has found absolute truth. A celestial God, a kingdom of heaven accessible only through renunciation of the earthly world. But what is truth for the weak, what serves their will to survive in mediocrity, cannot be considered true for the strong, for those who have the courage to embrace life in all its cruelty and beauty. Not all men are weak or cowardly in spirit to accept that truth under cultural pressure. Christianity has tried to propagate itself to all men, imposing its moral uniformity, preaching a dogma of truth that crushes differences, that suffocates the instinct of overcoming. As I noted in the Antichrist, Christianity has been until now humanity's greatest misfortune. Why? Because instead of celebrating life, it has despised it, exalting values that benefit only those who are incapable of facing the world without hiding behind herd morality. That is the true falsity of Christian truth. It presents itself as a universal dogma, as a divine revelation applicable to all, when in reality it is only the perspective of the weak, the interpretation of those who cannot bear the weight of greatness, of self-creation. You have understood it. We are not all weak. We cannot all accept that Christian truth that denies instincts, that represses life, that glorifies suffering instead of seeing it as something to overcome. The strong man needs no heaven. He elevates himself by his own will. The Übermensch does not submit to a truth that does not serve his life, his creative impulse. What is true for the noble spirit is that which strengthens him, which drives him to create, to affirm his existence without fear, without resentment. So yes, when a truth becomes decadent, when it no longer affirms life but weakens it, it is false according to my criterion, although within its own schemes it may continue to consider itself valid, as in the case of Christianity. Christian truth is decadent because it suppressed the vital instinct, glorified weakness and submission, and built its kingdom on the contempt for everything that lives with fullness. It is a truth that has degenerated because it no longer springs from life, but from its negation. That is why I reject any truth that tries to propagate itself universally, especially when it is born of cowardice, of fear of life, of the inability to embrace chaos, struggle, suffering. Each strong man must create his own truth, a truth that serves his biology, his will to power, and that does not submit to the idols of the weak.
Antonio, therefore, in reality, a universal truth is an impossibility, since each man has his own organic psychological constitution.
Nietzsche. Exactly, friend. A universal truth is an impossibility precisely because each man, each being, each individual, has a distinct, unique organic and psychological constitution. What philosophers and moralists have tried for centuries, imposing a single truth valid for all times and all men, is nothing but a decadent illusion, a dream of uniformity that crushes the vital differences between men. Life itself shows us that everything is difference, diversity, becoming. There is no place in it for eternal and absolute truths. Each man is a world unto himself, a set of instincts, passions, wills, and therefore each one interprets the world from his own biological and psychological perspective. In this sense, each truth is, ultimately, an interpretation, a construction that emerges from the vital necessity of asserting oneself in the world. What may be true for one, because it serves his life, because it strengthens his will, may be false or irrelevant for another. That is why I say there are no facts in the traditional sense, only interpretations. Think about this. How could there be a universal truth if there is no universal man? Each of us has different needs, desires, capabilities. Some are made to be lions, like Julius Caesar, who embodied the pure joy of conquest and creation, while others are like lambs, like those Christian priests who preach meekness and humility while cowering in their churches, seeking protection, security, a life without risks. How could one truth be valid for both the lion and the lamb? What is good for one is dangerous for the other. As I wrote in Beyond Good and Evil, for different men there must be different moral norms. And I would add, different truths. The fatal error of Christianity, of Platonism, and of all philosophies that have sought to impose a universal truth, is that they do not recognize this fundamental diversity. They try to homogenize man, to make us all uniform, domesticated, stripping us of our singularities, of our vital potency. This is the tragedy of universal morality. It transforms all men into equals, when life itself is based on difference, on hierarchy, on the multiplicity of forces. A universal truth would be, at its core, a negation of life itself. Each organic and psychological constitution requires its own truth, a truth aligned with that individual's will to power. The strong man does not need the same truths as the weak man. The man who yearns for greatness, creation, overcoming, cannot accept the same truths as the man who only seeks peace, security, and comfort. It is a fatal illusion to believe that a single truth can govern all equally. In fact, that is the symptom of a culture in decadence. That is why, friend, my perspectivism is not just a philosophical theory, but a call to autonomy, to individual creation. Each man must forge his own truth, a truth that serves him, that strengthens his life, that affirms his being. The Übermensch submits to no universal truth, but creates his own values, his own interpretations, based on his vital force. Therefore, universal truth is not only impossible, but undesirable. What we need is not a truth that tries to encompass all, but a multiplicity of truths, each born from the unique vital impulse of each being. Life is plural, life is becoming, and so too must truth be. Something organic, changing, something that serves life, and not that subjugates or weakens it in the name of a transcendental ideal. We are not all equal as men, and therefore, we cannot have the same truth.
Antonio, that refutes at a stroke the Platonic idea of man, as a universal that exists in a world of ideas, denying the plurality of organic psychological forms of the human species. the fact that there is a hierarchy between more vital and weaker men, and likewise, it refutes the pretended universality of the Kantian categorical imperative, since one cannot pretend that the law of one subject is universally valid for subjects of different organic nature.
Nietzsche. Exactly, friend. You have understood it perfectly. With that decisive blow, we refute the Platonic idea of man as a universal that would exist in a supposed world of ideas, a place beyond the earthly where there would be a perfect, immortal essence, an eternal human form that all men would embody imperfectly. What a fatal illusion, what profound contempt for living and changing reality. Plato, in his hatred for concrete life and the earthly, created this fantasy of an ideal and static world, where everything would be pure, perfect, immutable. In doing so, he committed the great metaphysical crime of denying plurality, the difference between men, and imposing the idea that there exists a single human essence to which we must all aspire. Nothing could be further from vital truth. There is no fixed and eternal human essence, but an infinite diversity of forms, wills, and capacities. Each man is a singular expression of life, and there is no single mold into which we all fit. The same can be said of the Kantian categorical imperative, another illusion of universality. Kant, like Plato, dreamed of moral laws that could be valid for all men without exception, based on pure reason, detached from passions, from instincts, from life itself. He pretended that duty and morality could exist independently of men's biological and psychological differences, imposing a rigid morality that does not take into account the natural hierarchy between men. But this is simply a denial of vital reality. The categorical imperative demands that you act in such a way that your action can be universalized, that the law of a single subject be applicable to all subjects. But how can the law of a lion be the same as that of a lamb? How can the morality of a strong man, of a creator, of someone who is made to govern and elevate himself, be the same as that of a weak, submissive man who only seeks security and comfort? It is absurd to pretend that the same moral law governs all men. The organic and psychological nature of each individual is different, and therefore, the laws that govern their actions are also different. Kant committed the fatal error of abstracting man, of assuming that all men are equal in morality and reason, ignoring that life itself is hierarchical, that there are men more vital, stronger, more capable of creating and assuming the weight of the world, while others are weaker, more in need of guides, security, imposed moralities. As I wrote in Beyond Good and Evil, moralists have never understood that, without the difference between men, there would be no morality. Kantian universality is a fantasy because it does not recognize the plurality of vital forms among men. For Kant, what matters is that morality be coherent with a universal reason, but I affirm that morality must be coherent with life itself, and life is diversity, struggle, hierarchy. What is good for some is not necessarily good for others, and the idea of imposing a universal law only suffocates the greatness of those who are made to overcome themselves. This is precisely why I refute both Plato and Kant. Both despise life, both impose a rigid, abstract and universal scheme that does not take into account the vital difference between men. They try to homogenize what is essentially plural and dynamic. True life lies in becoming, in the continuous creation of new values, not in subjection to immutable norms or universal essences. Therefore, we reject the universality of the categorical imperative and the Platonic idea, because each man must be measured according to his own nature, his organic constitution, his unique psychology. Moral law, if there is to be any, must arise from life, must be the expression of each individual's will to power. What is good for the strong man, what allows him to grow, create, dominate, is his truth, his morality, and cannot be applicable to weak men, who need other schemes to survive. So yes, friend, you have clearly grasped the great refutation of these systems of thought. Life itself contradicts them.
Antonio, to finish, is there anything else you would like to add that we haven't touched on, in relation to truth?
Nietzsche. Ah, friend, we have walked through the abysses of truth and there are still shadows to explore. If there is something I would like to add, it is this. Truth, as I conceive it, is not only a question of what serves life, of what strengthens or weakens, but is also a field of struggle, a space where wills are played out in constant combat. Truth is not a destination, not a goal to be reached to rest, but a battlefield where interpretations clash, where the old crumbles and the new emerges as an act of creation and destruction. We have spoken of the organic creation of truth, of its biological nature, of how each being, and each biology, creates its own truth. But, ultimately, we must remember that all truth is temporal, contingent. Nothing is eternal in this world, not even the truth that one day served us as a guide. The strong one is he who can create truths, but also he who knows how to destroy them when they no longer serve life, when they become chains that bind us to the past. The danger, friend, is that even the most powerful truths, those that arise from life and the will to power, can degenerate, can become dogmas. When a truth crystallizes, when it ceases to be a vital tool and becomes an immovable idol, it loses its strength, loses its vitality. As I said in Twilight of the Idols, all great idols crumble, not because of their height, but because of their inner emptiness. The creative man must be willing to tear down his own truths when they no longer serve his vital impulse, when they become false in the deepest sense, when they cease to affirm life. Thus, there is an ultimate principle I want you to preserve, a principle that goes beyond mere perspectivism or vitalism. Truth is always something that must be tested, something that must be questioned, even destroyed if necessary. We cannot allow our creations to become our prisons. The strong man, the Übermensch, does not fear destroying what he himself has built if it allows him to continue his upward path, his eternal becoming. Truth, then, is an act of will, not a revelation. And as such, it must be constantly renewed. Those who seek in truth a refuge, a final certainty, are condemned to weakness, because truth is not an end, but a continuous process of creation, destruction, and overcoming. The free man, the free spirit, is one who can stand upon chaos without clinging to any definitive certainty. With this, friend, I close our journey. May the truth you forge always be a hammer for destroying idols, even those you have raised yourself, and may you never cease to create and overcome yourself.